Hey everyone, and welcome back to another deep dive. This time, we're stepping back in time to explore ancient Rome,
Specifically, the early imperial period.
a period packed with fascinating stories and incredible achievements. To help guide our exploration, we've got some really amazing
Oh
sources.
yeah, we've got some classics lined up.
We're talking Suetonius's, the 12 Caesars,
Mary Beard's SPQR.
and of course the foundational text, the History of Rome.
We'll be drawing on these works to unravel some key insights and really get to the heart of what made this period so pivotal.
Exactly. And don't worry if you're new to Roman history. We'll break it down in a way that's easy to follow.
Absolutely. We want everyone to feel like they're right there with us, discovering the wonders of ancient Rome.
So picture this, a small village on the banks of the Tiber River,
Yeah, a humble beginning.
and from this tiny settlement blossoms an empire that shapes Western civilization.
It's almost unbelievable, isn't it? The sheer scale of their transformation.
It really is. We're talking about a journey from village to kingdom, and then hold on to your hats to a republic.
And that shift from kingdom to republic is fascinating in itself.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through that transition briefly without getting bogged down in the political intricacies?
Sure, Rome's early centuries were marked by this transition away from monarchy and towards a system where power was, at least in theory, more distributed among different groups.
Okay, so a system with checks and balances, kind of like,
In a way, yes. But of course, this period was also filled with internal struggles and external conflicts as they expanded against their neighbor.
yes, enter the legendary Roman legions. They were a force to be reckoned with, weren't they?
Absolutely. Even in those early days, they were incredibly disciplined and organized.
What was it that made them so effective, even against formidable opponents?
Well, their tactics, for one. They employed formations like the manipular formation, which allowed them to adapt and maneuver on the battlefield with impressive flexibility.
So it wasn't just brute force. There was a real strategy behind their military successes.
Exactly. And this combination of discipline, organization, and tactical brilliance allowed them to conquer the Italian peninsula.
But their ambitions didn't stop there, did they?
No, they didn't. They faced off against some pretty fierce adversaries.
Like the Carthaginians, right? Those Punic Wars were legendary.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the most incredible stories from that conflict involves a Carthaginian general named Hannibal.
Wait, wasn't he the one who marched elephants over the Alps?
That's the one. Elephants in the snow. Can you imagine the logistics of that?
It's mind-boggling. Hannibal was definitely a brilliant military strategist.
Oh, without a doubt. But ultimately, Rome's resilience and determination won out.
And these victories, not just against Carthage, but also against the Greeks and even the Egyptians.
Really cemented Rome's position as a dominant force in the Mediterranean.
By the 2nd century BC, they were major players on the world stage.
No question about it. But this rapid expansion brought its own set of challenges.
Oh, I bet. Managing such a vast and diverse empire was no easy feat.
Not at all. And that's where those famous Roman roads come in.
I was just thinking about that. Those roads weren't just for leisurely strolls, were they?
Not exactly. Those roads, along with their impressive aqueducts, were engineering marvels that were essential for connecting their vast territories.
They were the backbone of the empire, weren't they?
Exactly. They allowed for the efficient movement of troops and resources.
And they also facilitated trade and communication, didn't they?
Absolutely. They were vital for spreading Roman culture and influence throughout the empire.
So while Rome was expanding outward, things were also changing dramatically on the home front.
Yes, within Roman society itself.
The Republic, despite its successes, was facing some internal tensions, right?
Unfortunately, yes. Issues like social inequality, political corruption,
And ambitious generals vying for power.
all contributed to a growing sense of instability.
And this is where we see that pivotal shift from republic to empire, isn't it?
Precisely. The late Republic was a turbulent time.
Full of power struggles and civil wars. And it's here that figures like Julius Caesar and Augustus take center stage.
Exactly. We can't talk about this period without mentioning Julius Caesar's rise and his dramatic assassination.
It's a story filled with ambition, betrayal, and ultimately the death of a legend.
A real turning point in Roman history.
And from the chaos that followed Caesar's death emerges Augustus,
Caesar's adopted son.
and the first Roman emperor.
The man who ushered in the Pax Romana.
Ah, yes, the Pax Romana, a period of unprecedented peace and prosperity that lasted for over 2 centuries.
It's quite remarkable.
But how did Augustus achieve this? What were some of his key moves?
Well, Augustus was a shrewd politician, a master of propaganda, really.
He knew how to play the game.
Oh, absolutely. He consolidated his power, reformed the military, and presented himself as a restorer of order and tradition.
A stabilizing force after decades of turmoil.
Exactly. And he also laid the groundwork for a more efficient and stable administration.
So it wasn't just about military strength. He was also a savvy administrator, a reformer who reshaped the Roman state.
Precisely. He understood that lasting power required more than just military victories.
It required stability, efficient governance, and a sense of unity.
And that's exactly what he achieved.
And speaking of unity, this period also saw the emergence of a new religion, Christianity.
A small and initially persecuted sect that found its footing in the heart of the Roman Empire.
It's an incredible story of how a message of hope and salvation spread despite facing opposition from the Roman authorities.
A story that will have a profound impact on the course of history.
And of course, we can't forget about Constantine, the emperor who dramatically changed the course of history by embracing Christianity.
Constantine's conversion was a pivotal moment.
It really was. His decision to make Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire had far-reaching consequences.
Consequences we still feel today.
So we've seen a small village transform into a vast empire. We've witnessed the shift from republic to empire, and we've observed the rise of a new faith that will reshape the world.
The early imperial period was a time of remarkable change, of both great achievements and significant challenges.
And its story is essential to understanding not only ancient Rome, but also the foundations of Western civilization itself.
And that's where we'll pick up in part 2 of our deep dive.
We'll be exploring the daily lives of the Romans during this era.
We'll delve into their customs, their challenges, and their experiences.
So stay tuned. We'll be right back to uncover more hidden stories of ancient Rome.
And we'll see how their legacy continues to shape our world today.
And while you're waiting, why not hit that subscribe button and leave us a comment? We'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode so far.
And if you have any suggestions for future deep dives, let us know. We're always on the lookout for new historical adventures. Welcome back to our deep dive into ancient Rome. We've covered the broad strokes of Rome's rise to power, but now let's zoom in a bit.
Yeah, let's get a more personal perspective on things.
Exactly. Let's explore what daily life was actually like for the average Roman during this early imperial period.
So imagine we're time travelers walking the streets of Rome, say around the time of Emperor Augustus.
What would we see? What would we hear? What would we smell?
Yeah, paint us a picture.
Well, first off, Rome wasn't some sleepy ancient town.
Right, it wasn't stuck in the past.
It was a bustling metropolis, a true melting pot of cultures.
It was massive.
The population may have exceeded 1 million people.
1 million people. Wow, that's bigger than many cities today.
Exactly. So imagine the energy, the noise, the sheer density of people.
I bet it was a sensory overload.
Oh, absolutely. Just imagine. The clatter of carts, the shouts of vendors, the smells of spices, cooking food, all mingling together. And, well, sanitation wasn't exactly a top priority back then.
So some things never change, right?
Yeah. Big city life, even in ancient Rome, had its downsides.
But amidst all that hustle and bustle, there must have been a strong sense of community.
Oh, definitely. And one of the cornerstones of Roman society was family.
Family was everything, wasn't it?
It really was. The family unit was the bedrock of Roman society.
And the father, the paterfamilias, as they called him.
Held considerable authority. He was responsible for the well-being and, in some cases, the very lives of everyone under his roof.
It's fascinating how the concept of family was so closely tied to power and authority back then.
It really is. And speaking of family, there were some customs and traditions that we might find a bit, well, surprising today.
Oh, like what?
Well, Mary Beard, in her book SPQR, discusses the practice of infant exposure.
Infant exposure.
It was the act of abandoning unwanted or sickly infants.
Wow, that's pretty hard to hear.
It was a harsh reality of ancient life, reflecting different cultural values and limited medical options.
Right, a stark reminder that we're looking into a world vastly different from our own.
Exactly.
Speaking of children, what was childhood like for those who were raised within their families?
Well, for boys, especially those from wealthier families, education was highly valued. They'd study rhetoric, literature, history, preparing for careers in politics or the military.
So education was the key to success, even back then. Sounds familiar. What about the girls?
Girls, for the most part, received a domestic education.
Focused on managing a household and raising children.
Precisely. Their lives were largely confined to the domestic sphere.
Very different paths for boys and girls.
Indeed. But I imagine everyone, regardless of gender, needed a break from the daily grind.
Oh, absolutely. What did the Romans do for fun?
Well, they were big on public spectacles.
Spectacles.
Things like gladiatorial combat, chariot races, theatrical performances.
Ah, yes, the entertainment of the day.
Exactly.
And those iconic images of the Colosseum always come to mind. Was it really as brutal as we imagine?
It certainly could be. Gladiators were often slaves or prisoners of war, and while some bouts were more for show, others were fights to the death.
It's hard to fathom that such violent spectacles were a source of entertainment.
It really highlights how different their values and sensibilities were from ours.
Right, and it's a reminder that exploring history isn't just about admiring achievements. It's also about understanding mindsets, very different from our own.
Exactly.
So we've talked about spectacles, but what about everyday life? What did Romans eat? What did they wear? What were their homes like?
Well, their diet was largely based on what was readily available in the Mediterranean climate.
So lots of fresh ingredients.
Bread, olive oil, fruits, vegetables, and fish. Meat was more of a luxury.
Sounds pretty healthy, actually. And what about fashion? Was everyone strolling around in togas?
Not quite. The toga was more of a formal garment, a symbol of Roman citizenship.
Ah, status symbol.
For everyday wear, men typically wore tunics, and women wore a longer tunic called a stola.
So not quite the toga parties we see in movies.
Not exactly. What about housing? Did everyone live in those grand villas we often see depicted?
Yeah, those lavish estates.
Well, those were reserved for the elite. Most Romans lived in more modest dwellings. Some in single-family houses, condomiceries, others in multi-story apartment buildings known as insulae.
Wait, apartment buildings in ancient Rome.
Yes. And these insulae could be quite crowded, with varying levels of comfort and sanitation.
A reminder that even in a powerful empire, most people live far from the lap of luxury.
Precisely.
Right. It's important to remember that history isn't just about emperors and grand battles. It's also about the lives of everyday people.
Absolutely.
Speaking of which, I'm curious about healthcare in ancient Rome. Did they have doctors?
Hmm.
Hospitals?
They did have doctors, many influenced by Greek medical knowledge.
So they were building upon existing knowledge.
Yes, but their understanding of medicine was still quite different from ours. And while they didn't have hospitals in the modern sense, there were places where the sick could receive care.
So they were making strides, but it was still a far cry from modern medicine.
Yeah.
This makes me think about another aspect of Roman society that we can't shy away from: slavery.
Slavery was, unfortunately, a deeply ingrained part of the Roman economy and social structure.
It's a dark chapter in their history.
It is. Slaves were acquired through conquest and trade, and they performed a wide range of tasks, from manual labor to household service.
It raises questions about the ethical complexities of their society.
It does. Were there any laws or customs that dictated how slaves were treated?
Right? Were there any protections in place?
Sadly, slaves were considered property and had very few rights. Their treatment varied depending on their owners. Some might have experienced relative kindness, but others endured horrific abuse.
A stark reminder that even in a society as advanced as ancient Rome, there were deep inequalities and injustices.
Absolutely. And as we explore history, it's crucial to acknowledge both the achievements and the failings, the light and the shadow.
Right? It's about understanding the full picture, even the uncomfortable parts. And that's what makes studying history so compelling, isn't it?
It is.
It challenges our assumptions, broadens our perspectives, and reminds us that the past is never truly past.
It shapes who we are today.
Well said. And speaking of shaping who we are, in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore the lasting legacy of ancient Rome.
We'll uncover how their achievements, their ideas, and yes, even their failings, continue to influence our world today.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into ancient Rome. We've journeyed through their rise to power, we've walked the streets of their ancient cities, and now
We arrive at their lasting legacy.
it's really mind-blowing to think how a civilization from so long ago can still have such a huge impact on us today.
It really speaks to the power of their achievements and the enduring nature of their ideas.
So let's get specific. What are some of the most obvious ways we see Roman influence in our modern world?
Well, language is a prime example. Latin, the language of ancient Rome, is the foundation for many modern European languages.
Ah, so all those years of Latin class were actually useful.
They were. Think about languages like Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese. They all trace their roots back to Latin.
So it's not just vocabulary, is it? Didn't the Romans also influence our grammar and sentence structure?
Absolutely. Latin's grammatical structure had a huge influence on the development of those Romance languages. And even English, though not a direct descendant of Latin, borrows heavily from Latin vocabulary.
Especially in specialized fields like law, medicine, and science.
Exactly. So every time we use words like justice, republic, or senate, we're channeling a bit of ancient Rome.
That's pretty amazing. But language isn't the only area where their influence is felt. What about their legal system?
Ah, yes. Roman law was a major contribution. Their emphasis on written codes, due process, and the concept of precedent really laid the groundwork for legal systems in many parts of the world.
It's a cornerstone of Western legal tradition, isn't it?
It really is.
It's incredible how their ideas about justice and governance still resonate today. And let's not forget about their engineering achievements.
Their infrastructure was incredible.
Those aqueducts and roads weren't just impressive feats of construction. They really shaped the way we think about connecting a society and building infrastructure.
You're absolutely right. The Romans understood the vital importance of well-connected cities and provinces.
Those roads facilitated trade, troop movement, and communication, didn't they?
They did. And those aqueducts brought fresh water to urban centers, which was crucial for public health and sanitation.
These are concepts that are still fundamental to modern infrastructure planning. It's like they were the masterminds behind the original interstate highway system.
In a way, they were. And their architectural achievements continue to inspire us today. Think about structures like the Colosseum and the Pantheon.
They're still standing.
They are. And they still evoke a sense of awe and wonder with their grandeur and engineering genius.
They represent a level of architectural mastery that few civilizations have ever matched.
Absolutely. And their innovative use of arches, domes, and concrete revolutionized construction and influenced architectural styles for centuries.
Even today, many public buildings incorporate elements of Roman design, don't they?
Oh, definitely. Columns, arches, grand facades. These features evoke a sense of strength, permanence, and authority.
So, from the words we speak, to the laws we follow, to the buildings we admire, the Romans are still very much with us.
Their presence is undeniable.
But what about their less tangible legacies? Did they leave behind any philosophical or cultural ideas that continue to shape our values and worldview?
Oh, definitely. The Romans, drawing heavily from Greek philosophers, really grappled with big ideas like citizenship, duty, and the common good.
They valued civic virtue and public service, didn't they?
They did. And those ideals still influence political thought and inspire democratic values today.
It's like their ideas planted seeds that have continued to grow and evolve, shaping our understanding of our role in society.
It's a powerful legacy.
But of course, no civilization is perfect. And the Romans were certainly no exception. Are there any aspects of their legacy that we should view with caution or even critique?
That's an important point. While we can admire their achievements, it's essential to acknowledge the darker sides of Roman history as well.
The shadows that lurk beneath the surface.
Yes, things like slavery, militarism, and imperialism.
Those are issues that we can't simply gloss over.
No, we can't. By studying these aspects, we gain a more nuanced understanding of their civilization. We learn valuable lessons about the dangers of unchecked power, the importance of social justice, and the complexities of human history.
It's about striking a balance, isn't it? Recognizing both the good and the bad.
Exactly. Learning from their triumphs and also from their failures.
Because ultimately, their story is part of our story.
It's interwoven with our own.
Well, it seems we've reached the end of our Roman adventure.
Time flies when you're exploring ancient history.
It really does. We've covered so much ground, from those humble beginnings as a village to the enduring legacy of their vast empire.
It's been a fascinating journey through the complexities and contradictions of this remarkable civilization.
And I hope our listeners have come away with a deeper understanding of ancient Rome and its impact on the world.
I hope so too.
But the learning doesn't stop here. I encourage everyone to keep exploring. Read those books, watch those documentaries, visit those museums.
Keep that curiosity alive.
The more we learn about the past, the more equipped we are to navigate the present and shape the future.
Well said.
And speaking of shaping the future, we want to hear from you.
Yes, let's keep the conversation going.
What surprised you about ancient Rome? What resonated with you? Leave us a comment and let's discuss.
And if you're eager for more deep dives, let us know what topics you'd like us to explore next.
We're always up for a new historical adventure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep questioning.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.